Welcome to Damsels in Dialogue, a podcast dedicated to female protagonists in fiction, film, and the stage. Co-hosted by India Marie Paul
and Katie Zutter. For our third season, we cover animation royalty as we discuss the female protagonists in the Disney Princess franchise and the impact they've had on women of all ages.
This episode, we head back to France once upon a time and discover the origins of the classic fairy tale and the Disney princess that saved Disney animation, Cinderella.
Well, everyone, here we are.
Welcome to our final regular season episode of our third season.
Yes.
It's all about Cinderella.
The queen herself.
Oh my gosh. She is so, I wasn't expecting to enjoy talking about her as much as I'm excited to talk about her today. Because there is a lot of stigmas on her being not active and all of that. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited to talk about that with you. So keep that in mind.
Yeah.
As we go through, because I'm curious what your thoughts are on how active she is as a princess. And
she's so iconic. She's easily one of the most well-known characters of Disney and easily Disney's fave.
It is. That's so cool.
Very exciting to talk about her today.
It was really cool. This is out of our usual order, but I'm excited to talk about it. Yeah. He really related to her because she comes from humble beginnings and then gets her dreams, it's through marriage and all of that. But he related to that because he was someone who came from very humble beginnings as well and felt like he got to achieve his dreams through his animation. So he really did connect with her. And there's one piece of animation in this that we'll discuss that is his favorite piece of animation ever. That he has said that. I think what makes her also so iconic is that the story of Cinderella is, there are hundreds, thousands of versions all across the world.
It's so cool.
It's so cool.
That came out of nowhere. It's which is, I think, the most impressive thing is that they aren't tied back to one singular. They all propped up in different, cropped up. That's the word. Cropped up in different cultures. Yeah. But they're the same. That's great. It's crazy.
Yeah. It's so cool. It had to have just flown through different channels or just that idea, similar ideas of rags to riches, I think is such an iconic theme that everyone hopes for and strives for, to come from a place where you don't feel like you have what you want or deserve, and then getting it is such an iconic theme in general. So,
and what a great cross-cultural theme that relates to everybody.
Yes, it does. And the phrase, it's a Cinderella story, is in our everyday vernacular. So it's just a really cool, iconic thing to talk about and to dive into. I remember in third grade, we actually had a unit on Cinderella where we read versions.
That's so fun.
It was really cool. We read versions of Cinderella from all over the world.
I'm now jealous of your school.
It was one of the best. I very distinctly remember. I don't know who came up with it or what, but it was a really impactful thing that we did. Because then we wrote our own version of Cinderella after.
That's fun.
So who knows what I wrote? I hope that disappeared. But it's a really cool story, and I think it is so relatable, and why she actually ended up saving Disney animation, which we will talk about in a moment. But I want to dive into where she came from, because it is so hard. It's so hard to track down the original because there's so many people who claim it. So I had to dig through and look on.
And there really isn't an original.
No.
You know what I mean? Because it's really the original of what culture are you looking at?
Yeah, it truly is.
Which is fascinating.
It is. And so what's really cool is I'll start with the oldest version of Cinderella-ish that we know in writing,
at least.
Because who knows? This is set. So the earliest variant of the Cinderella story is found from a Greek historian named Strabo. And this is somewhere between 65 BCE and 23 CE. Somewhere in that, this is amazing. So he wrote in his Geographica is what it was technically called. And while he was traveling through Egypt, he heard a story about a courtesan named Rhodopis, from whom the third pyramid of Giza was built. And so the story goes, it's a little paragraph. It's a very short little thing.
So this is just written. This is written. This is a white man taking culture from.
Yes, this is a white man who
people of color.
He was
Classic,
studying.
Good.
Oh yeah, no, this is very, very, very typical. But he wrote it in like his journal. Like it wasn't like he was writing fairy tales. He was just writing
just like this is a cool story and I want to remember it.
Yeah, exactly. So he wrote, and this is an English translation, so who knows?
Right.
But they tell the fabulous story that when she was bathing, an eagle snatched one of her sandals from her maid and carried it to Memphis. I don't know, Memphis is really hits the ear weird, but it's fine. And while the king was administering justice in the open air, the eagle, when it arrived above his head, flung the sandal into his lap, and the king, stirred both by the beautiful shape of the sandal and the strangeness of the occurrence, sent men in all directions into the country in quest of a woman who wore the sandal. And when she was found in the city of Naucratis, I think I say that, she was brought up to Memphis and became the wife of the king.
Amazing.
Amazing.
And how long had that story been told?
Yes, that's what's so cool. Is he heard it. He heard the story about a courtesan turned wife of king. So that was real. I was real excited.
That's really cool.
So that's the first I could find of the written version of a Cinderella-ish story. And then the next step that I found in history was I'm sure there's lots of in-betweens, but this is one of the big ones. One of the big ones was in China. So the Chinese variant of the story appeared in the Tang Dynasty somewhere between 618 and 907 AD. And it was about a girl named Ye Shen. And I believe in some translation, it is similar to the word ash. I'm not an expert in said things. So having small feet was a trait of beauty in China. So it actually works really well to think that the story became very popular in this century. Because this was right around the time where feet binding began. It began in the 10th century. So the story of Cinderella having really, really tiny feet is part of that story. And I can go into more depth about that story in the after hours.
Guys, I'm so excited to hear about it.
But there's a stepmother. There's the jealous stepmother who makes her do chores because she outshines the stepmother's daughter. So that still exists in that. And then there's fish bones that give her things of her pet fish. Nice. So like that's kind of where it goes with that. But there's still like a ball and she like still wishes to go to it. So like those kind of things still exist in the story. Yeah. And that was the first written version I could find with like the stepmother, stepsister. Yeah. Magic thing helping her go to a ball.
It's crazy that it's so similar. Yeah. Like that it is so old and yet the Disney version is still so similar. Yeah. To that story.
Yeah, like
I'm surprised because other stories we've talked about, they've changed a lot of it.
Yeah, it still stayed. I mean, the who gives what changes in each of these versions. Yeah, which is really cool. But the idea of a stepmother or someone other than the original mother, making her do chores, having like that hard life, getting something from wishing for
almost
it.
Always, depending on the
exactly. Wow. It's so cool, and like she loses her shoe, like that's part of it, and there's still the shoe loss becoming the way that you find the new princess. Like so it's a cool that still exists back in the Tang Dynasty.
That's cool.
So that's kind of the oldest written version that feels more like Cinderella, other than the paragraph from the ancient Greek historian. And then we move to the more what we kind of understand as the European folktale. So I don't know if it traveled, but I'll hit some of the popular versions that emerged. So 10th century was the Chinese version, and then the 17th century in the 1630s-ish was the Italian version called Cenerentola, which translates to Cinderella. Nice. So this is when we see that name kind of officially pop up. And the princess's actual name was Zezola, which was kind of fun. But then they called her Cenerentola as she is sitting among the ashes. So you have that is still there. You have a prince with a widower who was a widower with a daughter, and then in this version the governess of Zezola is like, wouldn't it be nice to have a mom again, and then works her way in to being the wife. Sneaky. So that was a cool version of like the governess sneaking her way in and then basically pushing Zezola out of like favor, and then making her do chores, and her daughter's becoming like who the prince now loves, who's Zezola's dad.
How interesting.
So that was a really cool change. And in this one, the magic comes from a dove visits her on her dad's wedding day and says, if you ever need anything, go to the dove of the fairies and ask for it and they will give it to you. So when her dad is going on a trip, this is another version where they're going on a trip of some kind. And he's like, what do you want me to bring back? It's very Beauty and the Beast-esque. Mm-hmm. And the stepdaughters want a whole bunch of jewels and they want dresses. And she's like, will you please go to the grove, like, of the fairies and ask for something? To tell them to give me something.
Yeah.
And so he finally remembers to go right before he leaves, and they give him a twig. And so she buries the twig, and it becomes a beautiful tree that then, like, grants her things. So that's a common one that we find in other European ones. So that's kind of the root of that. There are fairies mentioned, so this is kind of the first time that that's mentioned. I have a whole bunch of, like, what happens in it, but those are kind of the gist of that. The king invites all the women. I think there's only one night of a ball in that one. No, there's a couple. There's a couple feasts. There's the 3. So there are 3 feasts. She gets glammed up more and more every single time. Drops her shoe. We reveal that it's Azola. She becomes the queen. But this time, enraged, the wicked stepmother and stuff sneak out. And all she says is, he is a madman who resists the stars. And, like, sneaks out. So nothing bad happens to, like, mom or anything. Which is kind of on point to the actual story that inspired Disney.
Ooh,
so
okay.
Those are some of the highlights before the actual story. So the French put a twist onto this Cenerentola story in 1697.
2 days before the movie was made.
In 1697, Charles Perrault came out with, in part of his fairy tales, it was called Cendrillon, I think is how you pronounce it because it's French, or the Little Glass Slipper. Now, until now, no glass slipper has been mentioned. It has been gold. Mm-hmm. So it's been gold, or it's been a couple, like, gold looks like fish scales in the Ye Shen version, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So this is kind of the first mention I could find that was popularized of the glass slipper.
Did the Grimms come out at a similar time as this, or did they come out after? Like, they classically pull things and make their own versions.
Yeah,
amazing.
The Grimm one was.
How did these two men just to get credit for all these things that they just literally just made a glorified compendium?
I will admit that when I went to go research, I'm like, oh, this is going to be inspired by the Grimm tale. It's like, no, it was definitely Perrault.
That's awesome.
Because it is so much different than the Grimm. The Grimm one came out in 1812.
Got it.
And I want to hit on that a little bit because it actually is closer to the Italian version than this is. So in this version...
But this is the one that Perrault that Disney specifically wanted to use.
Yes.
And that's so crazy. I love that Disney, like, picks specific fairy tales. Mm-hmm. Because, like, even though they're written by sometimes multiple different sources, he's like, no, I want that one.
Yes.
Well, and sometimes you don't always know why he wants specifically that one, but it is very interesting to me.
It's really cool. And this one, I believe, was a ballet, too. So there was a popularized version of that, and it was really well loved. And it's a little less dark than the others.
Okay.
And the biggest difference with this one is the fairy godmother. There is a fairy godmother in the Perrault tale. And all the other versions have some kind of magical friend whose bones give you stuff, or a tree of some kind. Like the Grimm uses the tree, the Italian uses the tree that gives her things. This is specifically a fairy godmother in the Perrault version.
Oh, hey, Disney, here we are.
But that's, I was like, oh, they must have adjusted a lot. Like, they didn't really, like, it starts with they start with a widowed gentleman who marries, again, to a wicked stepmother who has 2 daughters and makes our lead girl, Cendrillon, do horrible chores as jealous. She's jealous of her goodness and her beauty, which, that's you do. And then this lead protagonist would sit in the corner, because you don't really get a name until you introduce her given name as Cendrillon or Cinderella, because she would sit in the corner after chores among the cinders and ashes, and they called her Cendrillon. The king's son threw a ball, and the stepsisters were going, and Cendrillon wished that she could. She began to cry when they left, and a fairy godmother shows up. So there we are.
All right.
There we go. The godmother turns a pumpkin into a coach, mice into horses.
There we go.
A rat into a coachman, lizards into footmen, and turned her rags into a gold and silver dress, and she was given glass slippers. So, I mean, this is like straight from Perrault. I knowing the Grimm one and assuming that Grimm was the one that inspired, I went, oh, no, this is just there. They didn't change it. Yeah. This is exactly what
they
it
just took this. This is the story they used.
Exactly. It's so cool. I'm like, what have I been thinking? Shame on me. She was told not to stay past midnight because if she did, everything would change back. She is drop dead gorgeous going into the ball. Like, everyone is looking at her. The prince led her into a dance and gazed at her beauty all night over dinner and wasn't able to eat a bite because he was just looking at her.
So, yeah.
There was a second day of the ball. So this is where we're differing a little bit. So there was a second day of the ball. She went and stayed until the stroke of midnight. So each night she's staying later and later.
A little longer. She's like risking it.
Exactly. She lost track of time and she fled on the second one because the clock struck and she left.
Yeah.
And she lost her glass slipper along the way. The prince picked it up and he could not keep up with her. So I love that she's so fast that he couldn't keep up with her. It's also like, well done. Well done.
In a gown, no less, with one shoe.
Yes. Very impressive.
Get it, girl.
The prince proclaims he'd marry whose foot fit the slipper. It fit Cendrillon, who pulled out its mate, and the godmother decks her out even more once again, once he puts the two together.
Yeah.
The stepsisters threw themselves at her feet, begging forgiveness, which she gave them. And then a few days later, she was married to the king's son, and she set up her stepsisters with lords.
All right.
So we have a much... like sweeter, very forgiving, like it.
Oh, absolutely.
I think it follows the line of Perrault's version of fairy tales, going to a more of a child-driven audience compared to some of the other folk tales that happen. So this is straight.
Yeah,
this French little twist.
It's almost word for word.
Yeah,
what the movie is.
Yeah, I was like, oh, this is it. Like, this is perfect. I really loved it. And then the version that I assumed it was the Grimm version, which is much darker. And I'll hit a couple little things.
Would you like to hear?
Yes, yes, I would.
So, oh my gosh.
Yeah, I want to know what your version of the Grimm version is.
Oh my gosh. So a while ago, in high school, I went to a camp, like a sleepaway theater camp for like a week or two. And the counselor was very German, and her whole family was German, like to the point where she, like, grandparents in Germany, etc. And they continued that oral tradition of telling fairy tales at night, which was super cool. And we asked her every night. We're like, you have to tell us one that's so cool.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, I'm going to do it wrong. I'm going to do it wrong. Like, she was super shy, super embarrassed. And we're like, no, you have to. So finally, like the last day, we had worn her down enough that she's like, fine, I'll tell you Cinderella. Because like, that's one that everybody knows.
Yeah.
Like, great, cool. And she goes, there was once a father and his husband.
What?
And then
no.
Immediately realizes, because she was so nervous to start the story, that's how she started it.
Oh.
Like, immediately, first sentence in, messed up the story.
It's like, I was like, oh wow, Germans were way more progressive than the Grimms did. Cool. I like that version better.
Yeah, she just like immediately messed it up. Like first sentence. And then after she did that and we all laughed and you know, we're like, that's clearly not right. And from the time period and everything.
Yes.
Had a good laugh and she relaxed. She kind of got the nerves out.
Good.
And just because this is yours, so I'll just do the bullet points that were interesting that she said.
Yeah.
Is there was, like you had said, there is no fairy godmother, but the mother was more important in this one, which I thought was really, really cool. Is that the mother, like a beautiful tree grew from the grave of the mother. Yeah. And so it wasn't this connection to her dad that she was missing. It was this connection to her mother, that she would go visit her mother where this beautiful tree had spawned from her grave, while stepmother and stepsisters are being just trash humans to her. And she would find solace in the birds that lived in the branches of this tree that was essentially the embodiment of her mother.
Yeah.
So there were 3 nights of the ball, which I thought was really cool. Each night was a different theme.
That's cool.
So each night she got a different style, and it wasn't until the final night that she got the glass slippers. It was like silver, like a silver outfit, a gold outfit, and then it was like a gray blue with the glass slippers. And then also this version that I'm telling you might be slightly different too, because this is like orally between her family.
Well, that's why I like that it's different. It's a little different than the Grimm one. So I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah. So it's, and I'm assuming it's the closest to the Grimm, but it's like the thing that like threw me the most was there still wasn't much about the prince. It was like you got to learn more about her, which is kind of cool. And it was very much, it wasn't like, oh, I want to go to the ball to get married. It was like, I should get to do this too I work hard. So it was her mother kind of like, you shall go to the ball kind of.
Yeah.
A la the, the live action that they really dove into that. Well, the other thing that really like threw me for a loop was the ending. Cause obviously this is very dark and this is most likely why Disney didn't do it is, classic locker and sellers that when they come around with the shoes and the first one cut off her toes. The mother was like, if you love me, you'll cut off your toes. Yep. So she cuts off her toes, fits into the shoe. Great. Gets in the carriage, goes away. The mother's tree is next to the road. So once he passes the tree, the birds flutter into his ears and it goes, there's blood in her shoe. There's blood in her shoe. That's not the right one, which is interesting that these birds, like everyone can hear them. Like it's not just Cinderella. But yeah, blood in the shoe, cool, go back. And then the next one, which is what mortified me more. And I had just listened to her say, the mom cut off her toes, was like, oh yeah, cut off your heel.
Yep.
You're like, if you love me, I'll cut off your heel. And the same thing happens. And, there's blood in her shoe, there's blood in her shoe. And then Cinderella goes back into the carriage. I find her, she puts her shoe on, she's fine. They get in the carriage. And then the birds specifically are like, no, there's no blood in her shoe. She's the right one. Yes. You're welcome. Goodbye.
Yes.
And so, that was just the bullet point. So it'd be interesting to see what was different. But that was the one that I heard late at night after we wore this poor girl down to tell us a story about that her parents, because I guess they did all of them, which I think is so cool. They did tons of fairy tales that she just grew up where her parents, and particularly her grandparents, would just orally have this tradition, which I think is so cool to have in this modern time, because that's how they started, right?
Yeah, I was like, that's exactly how fairy tales began. A lot of fairy tales began, and we talk a little bit more about this in the Rapunzel one. I think I dug into it. But they started with women who were telling each other stories while they were doing their chores. So a lot of fairy tales did not start because it was telling children tales. A lot of them start, and that's why there's so much chores in fairy tales. There's a lot of weaving, there's a lot of washing, like all of those things are tied into what a lot of women had to do. Yeah. So that tradition is purely built for women passing down stories and telling each other stories to keep themselves occupied. So it's a really cool thing. How cool. Yeah, it's a really cool thing that she has that tradition, because it is the original form. And it is super close to the Grimm. That is super, super close to the Grimm. And the Grimm,
what were the differences?
There's no glass slipper.
Oh, okay.
It's still a golden shoe.
Was it still like the solid outfits?
I believe it was a little bit different. A little more mixed? Okay. I think it was a little bit different.
How interesting.
Yeah, but it wasn't as intricate. Like that seems like there's a lot more flair than the Grimm one, which I love. And
that could be because it's orally, and maybe, they just add more as to whoever's telling the story at that moment.
Yeah, and there are those little like rhymes. It's like shiver and quiver little tree, throw some gold. It's what like if you know Into the Woods, it's exactly that story. Like they follow the Grimm word for word. So like that beautiful little thing is what she sings to the thing. The bird is the unique part of the Grimm tale. She sings to the tree? She sings to the tree, and the birds bring down the stuff.
Oh, no. Yeah. And the one that she told us, it was, she just went and was sad and talked about her day and would just, as if her mother was there.
Yeah. Like that's and
then the birds would bring down those stuff.
Yeah.
But wow, that's cool that she would sing as well.
That's what they have, these little couplets of rhyming things. And they have that in the Ye Shen too. So I thought it was like incantations almost to get what you wish.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. And in the Grimm one, and I think this is the same, where she cries over the twigs she plants on the grave, and that's what grows it into this magical thing. And this
one, it just came from the ash of mom.
Okay.
Is what grew the oral one that I heard.
Yeah. In the Grimm version, the father goes to the fair.
Brings the twig,
Brings the twig because it's the first one that brushed his hat on the way home. So it felt very Beauty and the Beast. I'm like, this is a fairy tale theme. I like that you have little things like this. And so, she plants the branch on the mother's grave, and she cries over it, and her tears water it and turn it into this beautiful tree.
Beautiful.
And a white bird appears on it and throws down whatever she wishes for. And when she wishes for things in the story is when you have the incantation of a little rhyming thing. So the stepmother gives impossible tasks for her to do, and all the birds help her. But I do think it is important to note the amount of birds in this version of it, because birds are all over the Disney movie. Birds and mice are helping her do so much in the Disney movie. And when it talks about in the Grimm version, birds helping her do chores. Like, that's exactly what happened. So I do think there has to be a knowledge and influence.
They knew that one,
from the Grimm, because birds are super important. It's the birds who keeps, it is the toe and the heel get cut off, which is super dark. And then at the end of it, did it end with them pecking out the eyes?
Yes.
Okay.
No, it didn't.
Oh, so in the Grimm tale,
no, it didn't.
At the wedding, they go to the wedding.
Yeah, I think she ended with they just like went off in the distance.
Oh, that's nice.
After going past the tree.
That's much nicer. In the Grimm
Which makes sense if you're like telling a child before they go to sleep.
Yes, that's fair. That does
make sense.
That's a good amendment to that oral tradition. Because in the Grimm tale, the sisters go to the wedding and the birds peck out one eye on the way into the wedding. And then they peck out the other eye of the stepsisters.
Of the stepsisters.
Of the stepsisters.
But not stepmother?
It doesn't really mention the stepmother in that moment, I don't think. I think it was specifically the stepsisters is what I wrote down.
I just hate her the most. So
she's
annoying.
She's a great villain. It's like horrible. She's horrible. And then they peck out the other one when she comes out of the wedding, and then they're punished with blindness for being horrible. So that's the end of the Grimm version of this thing. I don't think Disney wanted to do that.
Yeah. They did a lot of that. Like, let's cut out the last bit of the story. Because it's too dark. Thank you.
Yeah.
Goodbye.
Yeah, or like the last half of Sleeping Beauty.
Yes. What a wild ride.
That was a fun one. That was a fun one. So that's kind of those are some big bullet points of Cinderella. There's so many versions. I highly recommend looking up different cultures' versions of it because it's just so cool. But what has stayed the same is that you have a very kind girl who is in a horrible place. Like, is treated really badly, usually by some kind of stepsister or something. And there's a shoe lost of some kind. And then she marries a prince because of it. So that, there's a festival or a feast or something in each one of these. So that kind of plot is the same. But I think that's also why this had such a huge success in Disney's world, because everyone knew it. Like, it was such a...
it's everywhere. It's in everywhere. All cultures. Yeah.
Who doesn't like an underdog? Like, who doesn't like a Cinderella story? Like, that's just what you root for. So I think it makes a lot of sense. So earlier I said that this saved the studio. And that is very, very true. There's a really great documentary, if you want to watch it, called Rags to Riches, The Making of Cinderella. The original movie came out in 1950, so they were creating it at the end of the 1940s. I think they began working on it in 1948. So this is a very quick process.
Wow.
And here's how they did it. So they did this so quickly because to save money, funny enough, they recorded the entire movie live action.
They
filmed the entire thing with actors and like basic set props so that animators could just trace where the performances of the actors.
Because that definitely fed into, there was just a whole period of using live action actors to inspire them. I love that this inspired that.
It's a really cool... I always thought that would be more expensive, but what it does is it saves the re-edits of animation because you already cut it and edit the full film ahead of time, and then you just draw it on top of it. Which upset a lot of animators because they're like, now I'm forced to do this and only have slight adjustments. So there was a whole like thing with that.
Yeah.
But they did it in like 2 years. So it was a huge success financially, but they were in $4 million worth of debt in the 1940s.
Yikes.
Because World War II really took a hit on the studio. There wasn't a lot of extra money around. People, like a lot of dads and soldiers were overseas. It was a really big time of prosperity for the industrial side of things, but it wasn't a time where like novelties are flourishing.
Right.
So they got through it by doing a lot of shorts. So that's when you have like Melody Time and Fantasia and stuff like that. But they weren't overly successful. Yeah, I know.
I wish they did more of those.
I know. I love those.
Anyway.
I love that. But that was a time period where a lot of that style of short animation was happening, which goes back to the roots of like what they first did before they did full lengths. So they were staying alive by making training videos for the army. Like they were trying to do other things, and like Roy Disney was trying to diversify a little bit so that they could stay afloat.
Right.
So they were in a lot of trouble.
What did Cinderella do?
They were in a lot of trouble, and Cinderella basically, if they lost money on Cinderella, it was very likely that the studio would be no more. Like that was kind of the gamble of Cinderella.
And this sweet, kind girl just was relatable to everybody enough that it saved the day.
Yeah. And Disney is quoted saying about like trying to figure out what they were going to do. They were going to do a feature film. What were they going to do? And he's quoted saying, we need a story with a girl in trouble. Because like I think he was harkening back to Snow White. Like Snow White was such a big success. I think he was trying to figure out the formula again. So this is the next big princess movie.
And what a good time period to do that.
Yeah.
To have the underdog, the sweet, I'm just a good person.
Yeah.
Who gets what they deserve in the end. Like, excellent.
Yeah. She was a character that people could root for, that didn't overly question the stigmas of the time, which is, good for themselves. What it did do, though, is mark a time, the end. This is technically what people talk back and forth about what the golden era is of Disney. But a lot of people consider Cinderella the transition at the end of the golden era. Because this is the golden era. They consider the time when they were experimenting a lot with things. And Cinderella's commercial success is what made them start thinking commercially about making money from all of their things. Like they were always trying to make money, but it was a turn in how they thought about what they were actually going to do in later things. So this was kind of the end of the golden era. And then I'm not sure what era it might be the Dark Ages that this is considered.
Yeah, I think, because that's when I heard it
Sleeping Beauty.
Sleeping Beauty was in there, yeah.
Yeah.
It was the dark times or whatever.
Is the dark times where they were.
The dark period, I can't remember. It was like something that was not the Dark Ages, but very similarly phrased.
Yeah, so this was the transition because it captured the experimentation of a lot of things that they were considered the golden era, and then they became commercial. Considered what people call like commercial version of Disney, which is the Dark Ages, until you get into the Renaissance. Right. So she was a big point of time because she not only saved the studio, surprise, it's still around, and it was a huge, resounding success. It was a huge commercial success. It was a huge musical success with a couple of the songs where it became into pop culture. Yeah. And he really wanted that to happen. So he brought in composers from Tin Pan Alley to make sure that they were writing commercially successful music.
That's brilliant.
Yeah. It was, and the first song that they wrote of the group that they got together, is 3 Tin Pan Alley composers, lyricists and stuff, was A Dream Is a Wish Your Heart Makes. So that's the first song where they sent it to him. And how they cast Cinderella is that this group of these 3 men, they're men, knew Eileen Woods and was like, hey, can you record this for us? Like, didn't tell her that he was auditioning. Didn't really tell her what it was. So she recorded it as a favor to them. And then he sent the demo to Walt Disney, who was auditioning hundreds of girls. And he heard her sing the songs and went, she's Cinderella. And then she got called and cast as Cinderella. Didn't audition, just sang a demo for a friend.
Just some guys were like, I know this is it.
They're just, So that's how she got cast, is she was on the demo, and that like never happens. That hardly ever happens, where whoever records the demo just to hear songs actually gets cast.
Is actually the person. Yeah.
So
that's so cool.
What a Cinderella story.
Yeah.
It all fits. Like it was really cool.
So we've talked a lot about the backstories and everything, but we haven't really talked about her.
Yes.
So in all of these, now that we've like caught up to modern-ish times of them like making the film, what about her character changed as it progressed? What stayed the same? Like, what about her saved Disney?
I think
in relation to the backstories is what I'm asking.
Yeah, I think it's pretty much straight from Perrault.
Yeah.
And I think where they succeeded was in telling that story in a very cinematic way. So they used lighting and they used drama a lot more in this.
Right.
And you had 2 animators actually working on Cinderella. You had 2 lead animators.
Okay.
And you can tell sometimes which scene if you start thinking about it, because
what scene
one did because there's apparently they kind of disagreed on how Cinderella should be portrayed.
Okay.
Which I thought was really fascinating.
Yeah, because I want to hear about her, not the movie. I want to hear about her as a character, is what I'm trying to figure out.
So Eric Larson and Mark Davis, one of the 9 old men.
Yes. Eric Larson has done a lot of things.
Yes, he has. And they were assigned to animate Cinderella. And they Mark Davis
so
wanted
they
her.
did both.
Well, yeah, it's weird that there was 2. And all the 9 old men were on this film, which is another big fact. All of them were, which is unique at that time, too. Mark Davis wanted her to have a more sophisticated quality to her.
Okay.
While Eric Larson felt she should be more simple.
Okay.
So in the animation, there's times where it's just more of like a simple, she's kind of romantic and dewy-eyed, while the other scenes, you can see her thinking more.
Yeah,
and that would be the one that Mark Davis animated.
Right.
So
how interesting.
That's such a fascinating thing, because I read that and then I rewatched it and I was like, I can start to see that, because I was surprised rewatching it how much more personality she had than I remembered.
Oh, she has tons of personality, and because people don't give her any credit, and that's why I'm asking if that personality was seen in other backstories, and if they were trying to pull things from the stories, or if they were just like, oh, we'll just do another Snow White, which is, it sounds like what one of the animators was like, we'll just make her Snow White 2.0.
Exactly. Well, I think that's what some of the goals were for people, was that we're just going to tell the story, because all of the original backstories for this and even the Perrault version are so short. There's not specifically.
So you don't really get to know her as much?
You don't really get to know her. There's not a lot of personality put into them. It's very basic, short fairy tales.
So they built her.
Then. And like the sass that we get, which we will talk about when we get into the movie, is from them. And I think that personality, and from the actress who played her.
They have all this backstory.
Yeah.
But Cinderella is not based on anybody. Is what I'm hearing.
She's not
based.
Like
she was built for, which is fascinating to me.
Yeah.
So she was built as it was being animated.
Yeah. There was an inspiration. I think the look was inspired, but not the personality necessarily, that I could find. The look of Cinderella is based on Ingrid Bergman, who's a famous actress of the time. And you can kind of see that in her facial features and things, and maybe a little bit in her personality. Like maybe they took some of that from her. The original.
It's just baffling to me that there's so many stories and they couldn't find a personality they liked in the story, so they just made their own.
Well, there's not a personality in the Cinderella stories. That's what's so sad. The backstories don't have her really saying anything. They're just talking about her situation. There's not a lot of, like, these stories are very much like, there was a girl. She was, in the ashes. She was crying about this. And then, like, she says, like, bring me back the thing. And they talk about how good and kind she is. But that's like,
but good and kind is the only trait.
That's it. All these fairy tales are super short. And
man, great. So the one we're talking about is based on these 2 animators and the actress. Great.
Yeah. Okay. That's really it. It's very unfortunate. The only inspiration I could find, and the performance of Cinderella is done by Helene Stanley. And she's done a couple different things. So the styling and the mannerisms of Cinderella were influenced by the voice actress because of her performance. Like the voice actress Eileen Woods had a very like breathy, sweet vibe about her. And they really, really liked that. So they tried to bring that into Cinderella. But the physicalness of it was the live action performer, because she did the entire movie as Cinderella. And
right.
She actually went on to perform as Aurora for live action filming.
Nice.
So she did that, and she did Anita for 101 Dalmatians. So they used her a lot.
Did she also do Alice? I feel like they used the same person for Alice as they did Aurora.
Wendy.
Yes, those
Alice
are the same
and
person.
Wendy are the one live action performer that was, I think, the voice actress as well. Because sometimes the voice actor would do the live adaptation.
How interesting
of it. But for this one, they used
no. Side note.
No, it's really, really interesting. That whole idea of them filming it and then animating it after is still fascinating to me. So we can account for the physical movements to the live action performer and the tendencies and slight personality quirks from the voice performance of Eileen Woods.
Yeah.
So they took it from the people that were working around it rather than, and probably some looks and maybe some mannerisms of Ingrid Bergman.
Yeah.
But they didn't have anything. It's very similar to Rapunzel and Sleeping Beauty, where there's just not a lot.
Well, Sleeping Beauty, there's a lot more for her.
That's true, because you have the whole half that they don't use.
There's a lot more for Sleeping Beauty than there is for. Yeah. And Snow White, I kind of credit it to there is a lot more for her too, but she's also a child, like an actual child.
Yes.
So you kind of forgive that like massive naivete and just not listening.
Yeah.
But that's so interesting to me that Cinderella has so much less about her.
Yeah, it's
than the other ones.
Very basic, like things that she is just upset and kind.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit more in like the Ye Shen, I think. There might be a little bit more of things. And there's her being thankful. It's just a lot of basic good traits. Like there's just, it's just kind of goodness is what she is.
I mean, that's not a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. And I know that's a big theme for her, but I'm excited to now get more into like the character. This is so crazy.
There was an early draft in which Cinderella was seen after the ball listening to the sisters talk about the mysterious girl with amusement, but he cut that.
Interesting.
I know. Well, Disney cut it because he feared it would make Cinderella look smug and mean-spirited, and the audience would lose sympathy
totally
for
could
her.
see that.
Exactly.
Totally could see that.
It makes sense, but I think it's really interesting that there was. So there might be some of that in the story that they also cut to eliminate any kind of potential negativity thrown into it.
Yeah, that can be construed any way of she's not just perfect.
Yeah. And she came straight from Perrault's story and all the people that were kind of surrounding her. But they did it in 2 years. So there also wasn't a lot of time to fully fledge out a whole bunch of stuff. Animators were given movements from the performers. Yeah. So that was just from it is, maybe that's why I think she is successful, that she is performed by someone.
Right. And it's funny because they do that now, but they don't cast actors, which is what baffles me.
Yeah.
Is like the animators do it themselves and then animate themselves doing it.
Isn't that so interesting that that they've now ex-nayed hiring professionals to do the stuff, and now you see people filming themselves running to like understand movement on top of it. I think that's a kind of a sad lost part of it, because there is something beautiful about having a performer embody a character for you,
especially when they hire multi-talented actors to be the vocal parts of them.
Feel like the physical embodiment is still part of the performance.
And you can tell when the movies that do that work. You could tell.
You can't. You just get a variety of stuff that you won't otherwise, because you try to make people too graceful or too like it. There's just a reality of that, which I think is really cool. Which is why I think some of the, not just Cinderella, but some of the other performances are really well done. Because I believe the voice actress for the stepmother performed it.
Ooh.
I think that to be true. But we could talk about Cinderella. And she has 3 movies, which is really cool. We'll talk about the first one, probably blow past the second one, and the third one we'll talk about later. But it was released in 1950. It was a resounding success. Lots of merchandise, saved the studio, all those things. Something that's really interesting is, other than the prologue and the epilogue, this whole thing happens within 24 hours, which is the difference from the original stories as well. It is set in France in the mid-1800s, but the dress is actually inspired by a 1948 collection of Dior.
Yes, and that was common then. Gosh, Sleeping Beauties was the same.
Yes,
same exact thing, where they would use the modern like runway looks.
Yes. For the dresses.
And for the dresses, which is smart.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure historians are not thrilled about it, but like for merchandising and dress selling, brilliant.
Yeah. A fun fact about Cinderella that you actually learn in the 3rd movie, but I'm going to say it here, is that her shoe size is 4.5. So small. It's what it is. It's 4.5. So as we are talking about Cinderella, there's a lot of people who talk about her inactivity in the film and how she just kind of like gets a prince and everything's fine. As you've been thinking about Cinderella and studying her for this, how do you feel about those kinds of
This drives me nuts.
Okay,
it drives me absolutely up the wall, because she is holding down the fort of a home that she grew up in, that everyone who has ever loved her has died. And this is the last thing she has to connect to these people. And at the time, she has nowhere to go.
Yep.
What is she going to do? Go be a prostitute? Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Like, what are the options?
Those are her options.
Yeah.
Right. So she is trying to make the best of her situation. And even like, and in the movie, they take it a step further where she has these kind of subtly sassy moments that kind of get her through the day.
Yes.
But she is still nothing but kind to these people who treat her like absolute trash. And you love how kind she is to others. And the thing that bothers me the most is when they're like, oh yeah, she just gets a man and he just saves her. Like, does she deserve it? Does she earn it? She doesn't need to fight for it. She is already an amazing human being.
Maybe you're just allowed to have something nice.
Yeah, she deserves it because she is a great person. And I think that's what a lot of people enjoy about it is that it's not that she's settling. She doesn't know where to go. You know? And the thing of her going off to the ball, it's not that she's going there to be like, I could marry the prince. That's like never something she even says outright.
Yeah.
Like she's literally like, everybody gets to go. I can go too.
I want to go.
I'm a girl who fits the parameters. I get to go and dance and have a beautiful dress and right?
Yeah.
Like that's what she is focused on.
Yep.
So it just so happens that she goes there and has this beautiful aura and is just so thrilled to be out. And she's finally like getting an escape from this life. And even then when she comes home, she's like, oh, what a wonderful dream.
Yeah, just nice.
She's, you know what I mean? And it's like, she's so nice. She is so kind that, and it's not I went off to marry him to change my life. She's like, I just needed a day off. Well, so it drives me nuts. It drives me nuts when they're so weird about her.
I agree. And here's the point that I forgot because I haven't watched it in a hot second. I rewatched it. She doesn't know it's the prince that she's dancing with the whole night. She's like,
she just had a great time.
Yeah, just met a guy. He looked
nice. Had a night out.
She looked nice. And she's like, I have to go. I haven't said hi to the prince yet. He's like, wait. And then she leaves. She did not know. She just met a guy. No. She wanted to go to a ball because she doesn't get nice things in her life.
Yeah.
And then something nice happened.
She wanted a day off. Yeah. And something nice happened to her because he saw of all of these people who I'm sure a lot of them are similar to the stepsisters. A lot of them came there to become a princess, to become queen. That is the reason they went there. And that is what wins over the prince. Yeah. Because she's the only one
not playing a game.
Who's there. No, she's not playing a game. She's just there to enjoy a night off. And that is where he like, oh, so this is love. It comes from is she is just truly enjoying being with him and being out, whereas everyone else there is like, I'm going to be queen. Look at me. Yep. So it just drives me nuts that they're like, oh, she was still like saved. And yes, she was. Yes, for sure. But do not tell me she didn't deserve it and then it doesn't make sense.
Like, are you saying that kindness doesn't deserve nice karma? Like, I don't. Yeah. Like, this is like a whole karma thing happening. Like, sometimes nice things can happen to nice people.
Yes. And I think that's one of the big reasons, too, that it resonated so well in the era, like you were talking about. And that, like, when it came out, it's the war and everything. Yeah. And you're like, no, if you were a kind and good person, karma will come back. And I think that's something that a lot of people amongst this terrible time that like, okay, wait, no, the other shoe will drop. Yeah. And it may take a lot of dealing with just terrible situations to get there, but it will. Yeah. And we will have our Cinderella story. Yeah. And if you just keep being kind and honest and true, you'll get there. And I think that's awesome.
It's
and I
so
think she
optimistic.
Doesn't get enough credit.
It's a really optimistic outlook. And is it realistic? Probably not.
No.
Like, but there it's okay to have an optimistic moment. This whole movie is just like good thoughts bring good things. Like it's just that's why I was surprised at how much like I judge Cinderella of like, well, she just like gets a guy and whatever. It's like, but
yeah, and a lot of people do.
She doesn't do like. I was impressed rewatching it on how sassy she is when she's not, like to the animals.
With her friends. She's super fun.
To
you could tell this is
she's like
this is her like coping mechanism to like get through it. She has that air of like being fully aware of her surroundings and knowing a little more like, okay, the stepsisters are being ridiculous.
Yeah.
And you love that. And I think she's like, classic, similar to Snow White, that everybody changes around her. But what's different that I think resonates with a lot of people is the people closest to her don't change because of her.
Yeah.
They get more and more frustrated and jealous.
Yeah.
Because of her.
Yep.
And really nobody changes because of her. She is just such a good person.
That you root for her.
You root for her. She's so far above everybody else that the prince is like, yes, this one is not here for themselves.
Yeah.
Like in a weird, conniving way.
Yeah.
And you love that. And you're like, oh, I could just be me.
Yeah.
And that is why she didn't make it very far in the heroic schemes, because that's just not her MO. She's not I'm running into a burning building. She is just genuinely a great person, and you see that you want her around.
Well, and I think was harder for people before more the modern princesses came out in the Renaissance who were more active in the heroism to look at that and be like, well, she just sits around, does some chores, and then gets a prince. Like, we now have the other types of heroines to look at too. So I think it was something that also was a little hated for a while because we didn't have the other. And I think now that we have the other, I'm more willing as well to enjoy that she's just a good person. You know, like I think,
and that's okay sometimes. It makes it very relatable for kids because she could at any point be rude to them. Yeah.
Well, that's the lesson. The lesson is not like it's not as maybe active as some, but it's very real of being nice to people and being kind and that bringing goodness to you. That karma, it is karma. Yeah. Like that's the whole thing. Is
making the best of your situation.
Yeah.
And
and that I agree with your point that the reality in this is mid 1800s France. Yeah.
What is she going to do?
Where is she going to go? If like, oh, she could leave. Why didn't she leave? It's like, one, it's also really hard to break out of toxic situations. Like one, and in general. But she has known nothing else.
And this is definitely a toxic, abusive relationship.
Oh my gosh.
1000%.
It is. Like, Lady Tremaine in like the shadow when she walks in is terrifying.
What a villain. See, that's a villain story that I would love to hate. Yeah. Love to hate.
Yeah. I'd be angry too if her daughters were not what she wanted them to be.
Yes. Oh my gosh. She's terrible to everybody.
She's so bad to everyone. And one scene that surprised me at how emotionally impactful it was to me was when they're tearing apart her dress. That does not happen in any other story, from what I understand. I don't think it happens in Grimm. No, Grimm, she goes and gets the dress. No. And Perrault's, I'm going to double check because I don't think they tear apart her dress in Perrault.
And that's mortifying. That scene is really dark. And that's another one of those classic, like, oh, she's, all they do, princesses, is cry. I'm sorry. They tore apart a dress that was her mother's. Yeah. That her friends built her, that she slaved away all day to be able to just have a day off and slaved away harder than most. Yep. And you watched her literal dreams get shredded in front of her eyes and laughed at.
It's just, I mean,
I would cry too. Thank you very much.
It's like they're coming at her. They're taking things off of her. Like that's just physically abusive too. And I was like, holy shit. Like that's so
she's in shreds when she walks out.
Yeah, like that's like what Disney did was take the story and he did add these very dramatic moments, and that was one of the big ones. He added that element because it's not in the Perrault one. I just double checked.
Okay.
She cries when they leave because she's not allowed to go, and then the godmother shows up. So there's not this plot about a dress that she had that they rip. Like that's a Disney creation.
And what's crazy to me is watching that scene. She is just trying to not get hurt. That whole you see her. She is not physically hitting them. She could. Yeah. Like at this point, she is being physically assaulted. She could be trying to, but no, she is just like blocking her face. And, you see the shadows of it and you just hate Tremaine.
Oh, and the sisters.
So much. Yeah, I hated the Tremaine more because the sisters were 100% manipulated into doing that.
Oh, for sure.
They didn't even notice.
Yeah.
Didn't even notice until And you could see it. You see the shot of Tremaine watching it all happen, going, perfect. Plan still worked.
Yep.
See you later.
The casualness as she's like, girls, we're going to be late. Ooh.
Yeah. Nope, she knew.
Ooh.
She knew the whole time. And that is what Cinderella's been dealing with this whole time. And I think that really set the stakes. And I do appreciate that he added that drama, that it really raised the stakes. And you really appreciate how good and kind Cinderella is in that moment.
Yeah.
Because of like, this is what she's been living with.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not the petty remarks at bedtime or in the morning when she's delivering tea.
Yeah.
Not, Lucifer. This.
Yeah.
Is what she's been dealing with.
That level of abuse constantly. Yeah. Of course she's not going to be sassy to her stepmother. Does she want to have to deal with that? No. Like then she'd make her life even worse. So it's so horrible. And he did such a good job at creating that drama in the tale that had some, but not nearly as much. Oof, and so he added that, and he tried very hard to make the key moment where they're trying to get the key up to her very suspenseful.
Yeah.
Like, so that was
That's
a big,
cute.
It's really cool. And like the stairs kind of look like a Hitchcock film when they're like looking at how tall they are. So he added suspense and they were really proud of that. And Tremaine tripping the footman and the shoe shattering right in front of Cinderella. That was also his addition to it to make it more dramatic. Like he did try to add in more drama to the story. And I think he achieved it.
Yeah. And it only separates Cinderella from everybody else more. Because how many people would be able to be in that situation and still come out looking for the best in the world?
Yeah.
Like, if I was the prince, absolutely. I'd be like, this one isn't a crazy person.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean,
yes. That's what you want around.
Yeah.
That's the kind of person you want around you.
Yeah. It makes complete sense. I root for her. Something that I was a little disappointed in is that I think why she doesn't get more, we don't learn more about Cinderella other than like we get some of that sassy stuff in the morning, which is great. Yeah. We learn that she's kind. She has like that kind of personality when she's like scolding Lucifer and scolding Bruno for dreaming about Lucifer, like chasing him and stuff. Like that's really cool. And then you go into the submissiveness when she goes to talk. But what I was disappointed in is we could have had more scenes with her, even like followed her into town or something. Like we get a little bit of in later ones. But
because she takes care of all the animals.
Yeah, which is really fun.
So,
those are her friends. She has no friends, so that's great.
Yeah.
And the subplot of Lucifer and the Cats is completely Disney made.
Oh, for sure.
And it takes up, I think, too much time of the movie. Not because it's not cute. It's very cute.
Right.
It's very successful. Like the parallels of stuff is great. But there are lengthy comic scenes of the chases of those two that I could have spent with her going to get bread at the baker's or going to like to actually get to know her a little bit better. So it's only a little over an hour long. So for a large chunk of the movie to be spent on the cat mouse drama was a little disappointing to me.
Oh, for sure.
So that was the only thing that I was like, I wanted more of what we got in that first few minutes of it when she's getting ready and we see her as herself.
It is interesting though that even with how little they gave her, you know who she is entirely. Yeah,
that's impressive.
Which is that's like, wow.
Yeah. So I think that I am happy that there are sequels because I do think we get a little bit more of her and what she thinks about the world in the sequels, which we will get to in a moment. But I think I think they were very successful in retelling the tale, and they didn't add like what they added. I think helped.
Oh, for sure.
I think
for sure.
I think they were highly successful. It totally makes sense that it was successful. The music is beautiful. The villains are great. The comedy, they actually had to pull back some of the stepsister animation because it was getting a little too much.
They're ridiculous.
But yeah, it's
them
fun.
At Disney too is so funny.
Yeah.
Their reins are so loose for specifically those two sisters. And it cracks me up.
Yeah. This is like a little fun thing, and I'm sure you already know it. But She loses her shoe 3 times in the movie.
Yes.
And I think that is so cool.
It's such a cute,
it's a little
cute
thing.
callback.
I think it might be a callback to the 3 days of festivals and a lot of the origins. It could be a callback to just, comedy comes in threes as like a trope, but she loses
some foreshadowing.
Yeah.
Excellent foreshadowing.
Yeah. It's really fun. She loses it when she brings them breakfast, and that's how Lucifer misses Gus in the cup.
Yes.
She drops on the stairs. She loses it at the ball, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
And then she loses it on her wedding day. On the way
Which
downstairs.
Is so cute.
It's super sweet.
I love them running to get it real quick.
It's really cute.
Whoops.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. We've done this before.
Do I like how fast they got married? No.
But that's the thing. The thing is the 24 hours proposal.
Yeah. But I also get that they are trying to make it like a cute, magical dreams come true moment. Yeah. When you look at it, you're like, oh.
Yeah. They don't really get to know each other.
No. However, I do imagine, don't know how happy she would be with him, especially since you don't get a whole ton of him in the movie.
Yeah.
More than at least the first Prince Charming, but still not much.
Yeah, there was
still
more.
drawn kind of weird, still drawn kind of strange.
Yeah, they're figuring themselves out.
Yeah, but I feel like even if they did get married after a day, that the prince would be happy with Cinderella.
Yeah.
Because she is just a light to be around.
Yeah.
Not sure how much you do with him.
Yeah. We just don't
From
know.
just the first movie alone.
We're supposed to assume that he is all the good things that a prince should be. Like it's vague enough that we're like, and he's the prince.
Yes.
Like that's, we're left with that, There was more for him that they cut, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, what was originally supposed to be in there?
He was supposed to have a whole scene where he was hunting in the woods, but then he chose not to kill the animals. So that you see him loving animals. So you see that connection.
That's cool.
Between the two.
That is really cool.
But they cut it for time.
I see why. Yeah. I see why it's not in there, but that's really cool.
He did have some personality that they just cut.
Yeah.
I do think that the animation in the 11 years between Snow White and this was so impressive.
Yeah. That was a big jump.
Yeah, it really was. I was really impressed with how far they came in that amount of time. So that was really cool to see. I think her facial features specifically, you could just see more of what she was thinking and there's more detail. And then you had a lot of close-ups of her face with the mice. Can we talk about the fact that she makes mice clothes?
Yeah.
Like how cute is that? She just makes
and how skilled.
Yeah.
How skilled to be able to just make essentially doll clothes, but it needs to be functional.
And just has them on the ready for the new mice that come into, that's freaking sweet. That's adorable that she has with friends.
On it. If she has enough time to take care of these 3 full-grown women who don't do anything themselves, she takes care of the entire house and has time to hang it with her friends and make them clothes.
Yeah.
You are a superhuman.
Yeah. One of the sassy moments I really love in the movie is when she's cleaning and they get the letter from the castle and she's like, oh, should I interrupt music practice? And it's like that little pause where she's like, they sound like absolute horrible.
Is it music practice?
Yeah, I just but it's things like that when she's not in front of them, you get a little of that, how she's coping. It's just it's great. I really, really like that. I like that she is so in love with the prince when she finds out that he's going to marry her, essentially. Yeah. She is unable to mask any of that news. Tremaine is immediately like, okay.
Yeah. And I would be too. And that's another thing where they're like, oh, of course. And you're like, no, you wouldn't be thrilled.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have your Sleeping Beauty moment, your whatever, this guy who you fell in love with. Wait a minute, he's a prince and he also feels the same about you.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you're not thrilled about that information?
And the fact that she can't hide it, she goes singing and she passes off the clothes to Anastasia and then walks out because her life's about to change. The fact that she can't hide it just shows how non-conniving she is.
Right.
That she didn't think, I should hide my joy because they're going to get mad. That I really like that detail that I hadn't really thought about until I thought about her character, that she can't hide the joy.
Yeah.
She just immediately goes into she's just staring as they're piling, Yeah. sweet. It's so charming. I loved it.
Yeah. And she is interesting because another reason she didn't make it very far in the hero division is she doesn't change.
No.
But what's interesting about her is that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Is her being who she is, regardless of the situation, is what makes this story real and what it is and how popular it is. She is just truly herself under any terrible circumstance.
Well, that's her resilience. Her resilience is what's impressive about her.
Yes.
You know, and not
that's
lot
the
of
word for it.
A lot of other princesses are good, and that's what changes around, like that we said before, or they are pushing through and learning, but her resilience is truly baffling when you start to dig into what her life is like.
Yes.
Like that's a lot. It's just a lot. In the Disney movie, we don't get anything that happens to the step family. We break into they thought about putting in the Perrault tale when she puts on the slippers, she is brought to the prince. She was brought to the prince and the godmother shows up and changes her back into the thing, like has a beautiful transformation. In this, they tried it and they're like, it takes up too much time. She's just going to get it. Then we're going to go straight to wedding. So that they had played with that idea. And I understand pacing wise why they didn't.
Yeah.
Disney's favorite piece of animation ever.
What is it?
Is her dress transformation.
It's beautiful.
It really is.
That dress transformation is, I would argue, one of the most iconic pieces of cinema.
It is. Like this movie is in cinematic history. Like they chose it to save as like historical important things.
Can you imagine the first two princesses movies you make legends. Become historical legends? Like stop. Yeah. But that and recreating that moment is one of the peak moments of so many Cinderella story animations. I mean, that was huge when they made the live action. Yeah. It was like, how are we going to make it? Which is crazy to me with all the technology they had at the time of making the film. Their biggest concern was, is it going to be as good as the original? Yeah. Like, what?
I want everyone to think for a moment that all of those tiny little sparkles are hand-drawn. They had to draw the movement of every tiny sparkle that happens in that. So that's Disney's, is quoted multiple people accounts that is his favorite piece of animation ever. Is that transformation of Cinderella.
I'm unsurprised.
Yeah. It makes total sense. And so Cinderella becomes this iconic thing. Her castle is it becomes this iconic moment and a transformative moment of Disney coming out of their potential bankruptcy and becoming the studio that we now have, essentially.
Yeah. And she is still the icon, the legend. Yes. At parades and things and at events, she most often than not is the one hosting. She is the main the main character.
She's the OG. Yep.
Yeah, which is so funny because Snow White came first. Yep. But there's something about her that it's her place. Obviously, they use her castle a lot for the different Disney, her and Sleeping Beauty. Their castles are the most common used at the parks. Yeah. Which makes sense because those are the ones you see the most. At the times of them making it.
The original three, that was the first Disney
I don't
princesses.
think Snow White has a castle anymore.
You don't really see it.
Because you don't really see it. It's the two that are like, but who can't? Cinderella, correct me if I'm wrong, I think hers is the one they use for the
it is. Yeah.
Like
Cinderella's castle is the icon. Yeah.
It's just get it. Get it, girl.
Yeah.
Get it.
That's why I'm happy for you, Cinderella. You came a long way. They did make sure that they shifted merchandise to blue rather than like silver because they did not want it to look like a wedding dress.
Yeah. So. And then that's so funny because changing it to the blue is what made everything else change after.
Yeah. That decision was very
you
important.
Can't also be in blue?
There's only one part of the film where it's right before the stroke of midnight where it is blue and it has the white puffs. Every other thing is like silvery.
Silvery,
which goes back to the original tale, which is silver and gold. So,
and even then when it hits that blue, it's because they're outside in blue moonlight.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it was a lighting thing, not a
choice.
It changes colors. Yeah.
It's supposed to be very silvery, which is like harkens back to the originals where there was never like a beautiful blue dress. It was silvers or golds and that kind of stuff. I understand why she's still a favorite. I get that. Yeah. And I actually, so unless you have anything about the original movie, we can kind of jump into
I think, like you said, it's hard to, we can't talk about her big developments or changes because she truly is just a good person. I know I went really hard for her.
But, you know.
I do enjoy her a lot. She is not my favorite princess, but I enjoy her a lot. And I just don't think she deserves the hate she gets.
I'm with you on that. Because I'm like, she's not wielding a sword and like swinging around like, those tend to be my China. Yeah, she's not saving China, but she's a good person, and she's not just waiting for a guy to come save her. She wasn't. No. She just wanted a night off. She wasn't asking to be saved.
No, she's surviving. Yeah. She is surviving in a terrible situation.
Yes, and something good happened to her.
Yes, and she deserves it.
Let her have it. Let her have that moment. What I did, so there are two movies after this. They don't come around to the 2000s when they started doing those like Disney
doing that kind of thing,
straight to video stuff. What I liked about both of these is that we got much more personality from Cinderella that I felt still matched who she was.
Yeah, which I thought was really cool because sometimes we've talked about this. You guys have heard this, our complaints of some of these movies and TV shows just go hard left.
Yeah.
And this one, I didn't think
I did.
Yeah. It really, truly, it was just us learning a little more about her.
Yeah.
And exploring who she is, like what you wanted in the original movie.
Well, that's what I think. I think it actually still felt like her. Like I never felt like they now we're going to write a feminist version of Cinderella. Because there is more of like, these rules are stupid. Like, let's do it this way and be kind.
Right.
Like, the second,
which they could have with this second one. The second one they could have went really, really hard. Super, which is, it's fine to be super feminist.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
They could have gone super modern, super whatever.
Yeah.
But instead, it felt very organic because it was still very forward.
Yeah.
But it wasn't, you should do this because women. It was like, why?
She questioned
why
authority.
Can't we? Yeah. Why can't we kind of combine these two cultures? Because she does get culture shock.
Well, that's why it's so cool that it's set up similar to the Beauty and the Beast Enchanted Christmas, where you have the group of like side characters talking about, oh, remember this, and they're making a book for Cinderella, which is really cool.
Yeah,
and doing that. So all these tales are like talking about the time before, like, oh, remember the first day. There's three stories, and the first one is mainly centered around Cinderella. The other ones are a little bit less.
And this one they did pretty well. I was pretty impressed. Some of the like I combined vignettes thing doesn't go well.
Yeah.
But this one,
it was fine.
They did a pretty good job with it. They did a pretty good job. I wasn't mad about it.
I wasn't either. And I liked that the first story was about her first day in the castle. And they give the prince so much personality because we got nothing in the first movie. So he is all about her. He like they are truly in love
with her.
I adore that.
Same, sir.
Like, I adore that. Like, and it's a different voice actress because Eileen Woods would have been, I think, 72 when this came out in 2001.
Makes sense.
So I get it.
Yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a second. Jennifer Hale does it in this one and the next one. And there's some cute music montages stuff in each of these little vignettes. But, I mean, you see Cinderella dealing with the fact that she is now in this strict, uppity castle and wanting to just go say hi to her friends from the town. Like, and that she tries to go along and because the prince is taken away from her and he's really mad that he has to leave her to plan this festival.
Like immediately, yeah.
I like that he's pissed. So I'm like, oh, like,
yeah. Which is cool because you also see them they want to get to know each other.
Yeah. I really enjoy that.
But like aren't allowed right away.
Yeah.
And they're like, wait, no, I just got her. Like, let me hang out with her, please.
Yes, I enjoyed that little thing. And there were a couple women writing on this. So that was nice.
That's good.
And you see her get put into this more traditional, like, hoop metal skirt and this horrible like hairstyle. And so you see her stand up for herself, but in a very kind way.
Yes.
Cool.
She never gets, which is says a lot about her.
Yeah.
And she must have the most patience, the most patient princess.
Yep.
Possibly women we've ever talked about.
Yes.
Because she never raises her voice. at anyone.
Yeah.
Which almost hurts worse when she's disappointed.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when she does finally go, you know what? This is not working.
Yeah.
As an audience, you're like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
This is like good for you.
Yeah.
Which is kind of nice. You have these very different princesses where she's, I don't know if soft spoken is the word.
No, it's
because she's very confident what she says.
Yeah.
She when she decides to say something, there is a lot of emotion behind it, but it is a decisive, okay, I'm really not okay with this. We need to come to a middle grounds. I can't,
She doesn't apologize. And she didn't apologize in the first movie either. That when the Tremaine is like, oh, you can't go. She's like, no, it says I can go. And she stands up for herself in the original movie too, which is why this felt, but she doesn't do it disrespectfully. She doesn't she doesn't cry to the world. She doesn't it's just like, no, I should be able to go. It's logically, this is what it says.
She's much more intelligent than I think people give her credit for.
Yeah. Yeah. And she's she's a classic. You're going to catch more flies with honey. Like that's exactly what she is about in this movie. Like she's really nice to all of the servants. She doesn't treat anyone differently. She decides that she's going to invite her friends from town and just does it. Like,
of course. Yeah. That makes sense.
And who's going to
She now has a place to do that. She can now have her friends come over.
Yeah. She saw the injustice of it. And and no one really could stop her. They have a really good governess teaching her, that's Prudence is great. Like that's a fun conflict and stuff. But she does just decide I'm going to do it and does it.
Right. Because why can't she?
She's the princess. She technically can do what she wants.
Yeah.
So I do like that she uses that power for good.
Yes.
Like that's really great. Yes. And you do get a little more of that. Let's do it, pull up your bootstraps and go personality out of her, which was there the whole time. But you just, spend the entire first story of this with her. So it's super. And you still have Jacques and you still have all these cute side characters.
Gus.
Yeah. Love him. We got a new cat, we got Pom Pom instead of Lucifer. All of that. So I really actually enjoyed the second movie because I got to know Cinderella a little bit more. And I was impressed that it didn't feel like a different person.
Yes, I agree entirely.
Yeah.
That is all I have to say.
It was the first two tales of this were written with women writers alongside of it. The second one's kind of about Jacques. You still get Cinderella doing nice stuff.
Which is pretty standard, They're like, oh, here's this thing about the princess. And now we'll talk about the side characters, which happened in a lot of films and TV shows, which is not a bad thing. People love those characters too.
Yeah.
Just not what we're talking about today, guys.
No, the second one's cute. It's really she's still herself. It's great. She's trying to be the best princess she can be. The third one we'll probably talk more about in After Hours when we talk about Anastasia, because I think we do need to talk about Anastasia.
Yes.
In After Hours.
Yes. I do appreciate how open and willing Cinderella was to Anastasia. I think this is a lot about her character to have this person at one point during the first movie physically abuse her. Yeah. And in the end still be like, no, I think you deserve a happy ending too.
That was really
big
of her. I could not do that. That makes her so much better of a person than I would ever be, because that shows a side of her that existed from the first movie, that she's able to forgive 100%. People. And we see it in this third version that is centered around Anastasia. And I really liked her actively, not just being nice and forgiving her, but actively trying to help her find love. She is was trying so hard to put her and the baker together. It was so sweet. And that when Anastasia gets flung into the butter and the flour, she goes after her because Anastasia just got humiliated. She tries to comfort her. She tries to help. She brings her back to the castle to clean her up and help her undo what Lady Tremaine, you see Anastasia in trying to deal with the abuse that Lady Tremaine has given her, and Cinderella teaching her that she doesn't have to be that. That's right. That's pretty amazing.
Talk about that more in Hours. Oh my gosh. Yes. But I did want to make sure we talked about how
she's amazing.
Her doing that, Cinderella deciding, nah, this person has abused me for years.
Yeah.
She deserves happiness too.
Yeah.
Girl, no one is as good and kind as you.
Yeah.
Stop.
I felt right on track. And I think it was a really great character moment for her too. To be accurate. And that she like goes to town. She has so many cute outfits in this. I was like, I'm living for it.
She
it's
does.
So cute. I loved it. But that last story leads us into the third movie, which is the Twist in Time, I think is what it's called.
It's that one at face value.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, this is going to be super weird. This is going to be super weird. Lady Tremaine, you know, there's a missing wand. Lady Tremaine messes with time. Things get weird. You're like, oh, this is not going to be good.
Yeah.
And it is much better than I highly recommend.
Yeah.
Just watch it. Like, don't read the synopsis.
Yeah. It's
because the synopsis makes it sound crazy.
Yeah, it does. And it could easily have gone really like kitschy and
it could have gone so poorly.
But, oh my gosh, this is the darkest film of the group.
Oh, for sure.
The villain goes hard and it is like abusive and like there is drama. This is like a soap opera I was ready for. Like it was there is so much drama in this thing. And the basic idea is that Anastasia oversees Cinderella and the prince, who, by the way, in this third movie, the prince is voiced by Prince Eric. And you can tell. So I couldn't help but like Prince Eric is now the prince. They're totally in love. I love their banter together. It's really sweet. And Anastasia sees them in love, sees the fairy godmother, realizes, oh my gosh, magic is at play. That's how got the prince, steals the wand, turns the fairy godmother into a statue by accident, and then gives Lady Tremaine magic, which
is the most terrifying thing I've ever heard in my life.
It is so terrifying. She reverses
to give her Lady Tremaine.
Yeah, she was bad enough without magic, and now you've given her a magic wand with essentially no limits. So I think that's
like girl boss gatekeep. Here we are.
The inciting incident is so good that I'm like, who came up with this? There were a couple women on it, so that was great.
Great.
There's some really cute music in it. I was impressed with that. So that's another addition to this, like, hey, this is sweet. But the drama is basically turns back time to the slipper tryout of the first film. So you don't have to redo the whole first movie, which is great. Which is great. They could easily have done that. So they did that. Cinderella doesn't get the glass slipper. Anastasia gets to try it on. She gets to be the prince's person, and then Lady Tremaine spells him so that when Cinderella actively goes to the castle to be like, oh, when he sees me, he'll know, which is nice.
She goes and gets her man. Yeah. She goes and gets him.
Sneaks in, lies about being a mouse catcher for the castle, which is, she's so
in such a sweet way. She's so bad at it. She's so bad at lying.
That's really
And you love that for her. Yeah. It makes so much sense. Yeah, because when has she ever lied? Yeah. She's a little sassy, but not like outright let me lie to your face.
Yeah. So watching her uncomfortably lie to Prudence, they were going to initially just ignore the second movie, but they did end up bringing back some characters that came.
And I'm glad they did because it connects, it makes it seem more cohesive. Unlike episode 1 of this, where the two movies for Ariel seemed like they were in different worlds almost.
Yes. Yeah.
This one, I do enjoy that they tied it together a little more.
Yes, I thought that was really cool. And it initially was supposed to have Drizella getting the redemption arc, but after the second movie, because of the Anastasia thing that already built in sympathy, they had Anastasia.
That's nice.
But
that's nice.
You get a Cinderella that turns all of a sudden into this badass. Yeah. In the movie, like it gets dark when Lady Tremaine, she tries to disguise herself, get her way in. She realizes that the prince is under a spell. So now she's actively trying to get the wand. So you have callbacks to like the key in Tremaine's pocket that the mice have to help get. And she has to come in and then yells at Tremaine for what she's doing because she gets discovered. And then she goes to get the prince and gets like banished. She gets banished to a ship. I enjoy
it. Because Tremaine just is like, you can't be here. Yeah. Because every time she gets close, the prince is starting to be like, this isn't right.
Yeah. I love that.
Like something is wrong.
Yeah.
This is not working.
Yeah.
So, and she very kindly is trying to get her way into things. And, Tremaine is spending the majority of the movie keeping her away from him. Yeah. Because even a magic wand cannot keep the love they have for each other.
Which is so romantic. It's so gushy and sweet that like when I love that the theme of their hands touching, you knew instead of love at first sight, it was like when their hands touched, you knew that they were in love. So you didn't have to worry about like kissing or anything. It was a very sweet thing. And then the prince all of a sudden becomes this like badass hero who jumps out a window and goes like flying on a ship to save her from being banished. So that was great for him.
The animation though, this is nothing to Cinderella, but the animation of him flying out the window is equally the worst and best animation I've ever seen in my life.
I agree.
That is never how anyone would get out a window, but it is such a meme. Dead, deceased, over.
Yep. Yeah, it's a thing. It was just good. Like she ends up getting almost murdered, like attempted murder on Cinderella's life to get her to go away. And Lucifer gets like she's like runaway pumpkin carriage with thorns and stuff, which is great. And then she has to, she says bad kitty, which is one of the best lines in the thing when Lucifer gets thrown off of the thing. But she's on a out of control pumpkin carriage. She busts out of it, powers her way through it, gets on the top of it. Now we're in the middle of a Western action film because she has to hop off the carriage to get on the horse that's still running.
I'm warning you guys, this movie sounds crazy. It sounds crazy.
But it's so dramatic. It is like a dramatic soap opera, but it's so good because then there's right before that you have the twist of like she breaks the spell with the prince. You get to see her getting ready, and then Lady Tremaine comes out of the shadows and is like, well, he is going to marry Cinderella. And then you have a doppelganger, Anastasia, made into Cinderella, and then she gets banned. Like, it's so dramatic, but there's just so much action in it that I was okay with it. I was really
you could
impressed.
tell that it happened when it did.
Yeah.
Like, this was built around the same time as all these other action princesses.
Yeah. She flies to her wedding on a horse and in rags. Like, that's to stop it. And ultimately, she does it. She ends up forgiving Anastasia, who stops the wedding because Anastasia learns what love is and all of that. And so you see her forgive it. You see her jump in front of Anastasia when Lady Tremaine points the wand at her. And then the prince jumps in and reflects it and all is well. But I was just impressed by, I think we got to know her more and more because of the sequels. I was just happily surprised. I thought it was great. Tremaine gets way scarier and way darker in this movie.
Oh, for sure, because she's given power. Ugh. I will say the only thing about the last one is I think it's the farthest from who she is.
That's fair. I think they were trying to make her more active and more action-y.
Yeah.
But
it's still her.
Yes.
But it's definitely, which is better than most sequels, but I think it's the farthest from from her. Yeah. Because they were trying to be like, we're going to make her, and she's not an action figure.
No,
she's not.
Do
I believe that she would get on a horse and run in to say, for sure. I think she would, that kind of stuff she's totally comfortable with.
Yeah.
But still, she is not, the bit to the terrible lying.
Yeah.
But she is not I'm picking up a sword and fighting.
No, and that's okay. But I appreciate them trying to do that for her. And I think they created a story that was actually engaging for a third movie of it, the straight to video. Like, this is straight to video stuff.
Yeah.
So I was impressed. I thought it was, I was happily surprised.
Just don't read the synopsis first because it's crazy.
No, it is crazy. It's a soap opera. It's a soap opera drama. But I was actually very impressed with each of these sequels for Cinderella. And I think it has to be at some part of it has to be the testament of who she is being interesting too. Of her being a peasant brought into a castle.
Yeah.
I think that has to be part of why the second movie, especially, I think, was really interesting with her.
Oh, for sure. And so many of these sequels haven't, I don't know, doesn't quite hit as hard that we've talked about, at least.
Yeah.
There's a lot that we haven't. Like, Aladdin has a million sequels that we have not talked about that were very successful, like some of the most successful of the sequels. But outside of Frozen, obviously. Yeah. But like the movies that we've talked about of the second that were actually like really good and we learn more about the princess. Yeah. Was this one, Ariel. Are there any others that we really, really got to dive into a ton? Other than the first season with Rapunzel. Like that. Right. But even then, like you said, that's TV show that doesn't count. Yeah. Like, there's the sequels typically are just kind of thrown away. And for whatever reason, whoever got to work on Cinderella and Ariel. Like I would say the second one, not no, but the third one, not as much. They were around the same time. The second one was brilliant.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to me.
Yeah.
Like, look at how great these are. Why are we not continuing to do this kind of stuff?
Yeah. No, I was very happy with that. And
yeah. How cool that we accidentally bookended our characters like this too.
I know. Isn't that kind of fun? It's like
I love that.
I would say we planned that, but we didn't really do that.
No, I love it though. I love it. I love that we got to learn more about these ladies in unique fashions in their second movies in a great way.
Yeah. I really love that. And I love that we started with the beginning of the Renaissance era and we ended with the end of the Golden era.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So
beautiful.
Sometimes we do cool things when we don't mean to. But
it's fine, very casual.
So I think you're right. I think she deserves a little bit more than just she was just waiting around. Like,
yeah.
One, the toxicness of the whole situation is much more complicated than that. And I don't think it discourages girls from doing things for themselves. And
no, it doesn't.
The other, like, just sitting around waiting for your prince. Like, that's not what she's doing.
No, no, she at no points is she like, I wish someone would come save me.
Yeah, that's it.
No.
Yeah,
there's different stories for different people, different characters, different things. And that's why Cinderella, there's so many iterations of this story and why people keep making movies about it. Disney themselves
has so many versions.
Multiple Cinderella movies.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
How mad do you think Disney is now that they can't, in their Broadway lineup, add Cinderella because Rodgers and Hammerstein did it first? Like,
There's so many versions within the Disney live action and like animation. Okay, I can end on my fun fact. This isn't actually the first Cinderella they ever did. The first version that Disney ever did of Cinderella was in the early years, and they produced a Laugh-O-Gram series in the 1920s.
Wow.
And they created several...
Whoa.
Yeah, they created several short films, and one of them was Cinderella.
Oh.
And it was in 1922.
Nice.
It was the first version of Cinderella they ever did. So that is my... fun fact. And then this version saved the studio from bankruptcy.
I love it. I love it.
Well done, Cinderella.
What an icon.
She's great. It was a lot of fun talking about her and digging into her origin story today. And then next up, we're done with our regular season.
Yes.
But next up, we get to dive into our second Maiden Madness Championship tournament that is all about the sweethearts supporting all of these wonderful women.
So excited.
I'm so excited about it. I'm so excited to dive in.
It's going to be great.
I'm going to say I think Prince Charming, who is never referred to as Prince Charming, he's just Prince in this movie.
Yeah. Both princes are like that.
Yeah, I don't know that they'll get very far, but I did enjoy him in the sequels. So
yeah.
He gets better, but he definitely I don't see making too far in this tournament. But
no.
That's okay. That's okay. He was nice. That's all we needed to know at that point.
Yeah, and that's fine. The movie is about how sweet and kind and wonderful and resilient Cinderella is, which is why she's made it so far. Yeah. But I guess we'll see who makes it so far. Yes. With Maiden Madness.
Yes, join us. So join us next week. We'll start going through all these sweethearts supporting these women, and we'll talk about how well they do that and how badly they do that.
Make sure you voted.
Yes.
Make sure that you voted to make sure your favorite himbo makes it through the rounds. Yeah. So we already have those polls up on social media and our Patreon. Patreon, obviously the way it counts more. So
become a patron.
Become a patron to make your vote count more. And make sure that your favorite himbo makes it through.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you guys so much for listening and being with us today. And join us next week for some tournament.
See you then.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Damsels in Dialogue. Get ready, as next week we begin our second Maiden Madness tournament, all about the supportive sweethearts of the women in Disney and Pixar animation.
If you enjoyed what you heard today, you can help us reach even more listeners by subscribing to the podcast and leaving a rating or comment on Apple, Spotify, Google, or wherever you are listening.
If you want to join us for even more discussions about Cinderella or extra thoughts about any of our episodes, head over to our Patreon. There you can support the podcast and unlock an entire library of our exclusive after-hour video podcasts with new episodes arriving each month. You can also unlock research notes, bloopers, and more.
Follow us on social media and at our website on damselsinddialogue.podbean.com. Until next time, this has been Damsels in Dialogue.
Have a nice day.
This podcast episode is sponsored by Royal Princess Parties, LLC, and is produced by Hello Out There Audio, part of Hello Out There Productions.